I never told my son Daniel about my $45,000 monthly salary, even though he watched me live like I was barely getting by. When he invited me to meet his wife's parents at an upscale restaurant in Chicago, I made a choice. I dressed in my oldest clothes and played the part of a struggling, naive mother. I wanted to see their true faces, how they'd treat someone they thought had nothing. That night, everything changed. The truth I revealed didn't just shock them, it shattered their world completely, and honestly, they had it coming. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey, and if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. Let me tell you who I really am. Because my son Daniel, at 31 years old, never knew the truth about his mother. To him, I was always just the woman who left early for the office, who came back tired in the evenings, who cooked with whatever was in the fridge. Just another employee, maybe a secretary, someone ordinary, nothing special, and I never corrected him. I never told him that I earned $45,000 every month, that I had been a chief financial officer at a tech corporation for almost 20 years, managing budgets of hundreds of millions and making decisions that affected thousands of people. Why tell him money was never something I needed to hang on the wall like a trophy? I grew up believing that dignity was carried within, where silence was worth more than hollow words. So I guarded my truth. I lived in the same modest apartment in Lincoln Park for years, on the 6th floor of an older building. I used the same leather handbag until it was worn out. I bought clothes at discount stores, cooked at home, saved everything, invested everything, and became rich in silence. Because true power doesn't shout. True power observes. And I was observing closely when Daniel called me that Tuesday afternoon. But before I tell you about that call, I need to tell you about Lisa, my younger sister. She died 10 years ago from cancer, but the disease that really killed her started long before that. It was the disease of being looked down upon, of being measured and found wanting, of never being enough for the family she married into. Lisa had been poor when she met her husband. His family never let her forget it. Every holiday, every gathering, every moment was a reminder that she didn't belong, that she was charity they'd taken in. She died with that weight on her chest, never having stood up for herself, never having fought back. I keep her photograph on my bookshelf. In it, she's smiling, but if you look closely, you can see the sadness in her eyes. That afternoon, as I stared at that picture, I made a promise. This is for you, Lisa. I won't let them break me like they broke you. Then my phone rang. Daniel's voice sounded different, nervous, like when he was a kid and had done something wrong. Mom, I need to ask you a favor. Bella's parents are visiting from Nashville. It's their first time in Chicago. They want to meet you. We're having dinner on Saturday at a restaurant. Please come. Something in his tone made me uncomfortable. It wasn't the voice of a son inviting his mother. It was the voice of someone asking not to be embarrassed, to fit in, to make a good impression. Do they know anything about me? I asked calmly. There was a silence. Then Daniel stammered. I told them you work in an office, that you live alone, that you're simple, that you don't have much. There it was. The word simple. As if my entire life could be contained in that miserable adjective, as if I were a problem he needed to apologize for. I took a deep breath. Okay, Daniel, I'll be there. After I hung up, I called Sarah. She's been my closest friend for 30 years, a former colleague who retired 5 years ago. I told her everything. Sarah listened, then said quietly, "Be careful, Catherine. But trust your instincts. You've never been wrong about people. I already know what I'm going to do." I told her, I'm going to give them exactly what they expect to see. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. "Oh, this is going to be good. Call me after. I want to hear everything." Saturday arrived. I looked around my living room. Old but comfortable furniture, walls without expensive artwork, a small television, nothing that would impress anyone. And at that moment, I made my final decision. If Daniel thought I was a poor woman, if his wife's parents were coming ready to judge, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see. I would pretend to be broke, naive, desperate. A mother barely surviving, I dressed in the worst outfit I owned, a light gray shapeless dress, wrinkled, the kind they sell at thrift stores, old worn-out shoes with scuffed heels, no jewelry, not even a watch. I grabbed a faded canvas tote bag, the kind you get for free at grocery stores. I pulled my hair back into a messy ponytail and looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman broken by life, forgettable, perfect. I took a taxi to the restaurant. As we drove through Michigan Avenue, I saw the glittering storefronts of luxury brands, the well-dressed people walking with shopping bags. We passed a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk. I asked the driver to stop. I got out, gave the man $50, and talked to him for a few minutes. The taxi driver, a Polish immigrant named Wojciech, watched through the rearview mirror. When I got back in, he said, "You are a good person, ma'am." The fall evening air was crisp. Yellow leaves scattered across the sidewalks of Chicago. We drove through the city as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Finally, we arrived at Gold Coast, the most exclusive part of the city. The restaurant stood before me like a palace. Warm lights glowed from floor to ceiling windows. A doorman in white gloves opened the door. Inside, I could see crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and a live jazz band playing softly in the corner. Elegant people moved through the space like dancers in a carefully choreographed ballet. The menu, I knew, didn't list prices. Each table setting cost more than the average person's monthly salary. I paid Wojciech, stepped out, and took a deep breath. I could feel my heart beating faster. Part of me was anxious. Part of me was determined. I knew something big was coming. I crossed the threshold and stepped inside, ready to see exactly who these people really were. There they were. Daniel was standing next to a long table near the windows. He wore a dark suit, a white shirt, and shiny shoes. He looked anxious, his hands fidgeting with his phone. Beside him was Bella, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tailored cream dress with gold accents, high heels, her perfectly straight hair falling over her shoulders. She looked impeccable as always, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking towards the entrance with a tense, almost embarrassed expression. And then I saw them, Bella's parents, already seated at the table, waiting like royalty on their thrones. The mother, Patricia, wore a fitted emerald green dress full of sequins, jewels on her neck, wrists, and fingers. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. She had that cold, calculated type of beauty that intimidates. Beside her was Robert, her husband, an immaculate gray suit, a giant watch on his wrist, a serious expression. Both looked like they had stepped out of a luxury magazine. I walked toward them slowly, with short steps, as if I were afraid. Daniel saw me first and his face changed. His eyes widened. He looked me up and down. I noticed him swallow hard. "Mom, you came," he said. His voice sounded uncomfortable. "Of course, son. Here I am." I smiled timidly, the smile of a woman unaccustomed to such places. Bella greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek. Cold, mechanical. "Mother-in-law, it's nice to see you." Her eyes said the opposite. She introduced me to her parents in a strange, almost apologetic tone. "Dad, Mom, this is Daniel's mother." Patricia looked up, studied me, and in that instant, I saw everything. The judgment, the disdain, the disappointment. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled dress, my old shoes, my canvas tote bag. She didn't say anything at first, just extended a hand, cold, quick, and weak. A pleasure. Robert did the same. A weak handshake. A false smile. Charmed. I sat down in the chair at the end of the table, the one furthest from them, as if I were a second-class guest. No one helped me pull out my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. The atmosphere was already set. I was the outsider, the one who didn't belong. The waiter arrived. His name tag said Michael. He had kind eyes and moved with professional grace. He brought elegant, heavy menus written in French. I opened mine and pretended not to understand anything. Patricia watched me with that superior smile. "Do you need help with the menu?" she asked. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, please. I don't know what these words mean." My voice came out small, timid. Before Patricia could respond, she snapped her fingers at Michael. Her tone was sharp, commanding. "This needs to be perfect. We don't tolerate mediocrity." She complained about the water temperature, the position of the silverware, the angle of the napkin. Michael remained professional, but I could see the slight tension in his jaw. Patricia turned to me. "These people need to learn their place. Service is an art, after all." She said it loud enough for Michael to hear. "I think he's doing wonderfully," I said softly. Patricia looked at me as if I had said something incredibly naive. She sighed and took control of ordering for me. Something simple. She told Michael, "Something that doesn't cost too much. We don't want to overdo it." The phrase hung in the air like a slap. Robert nodded in agreement. Daniel looked away. Bella played with her napkin nervously. No one said anything, and I just watched, storing every moment, every word, every look. Patricia started talking about their journey from Nashville, how tiring the flight was, though of course they flew first class. She mentioned the Peninsula Hotel where they were staying. $1,200 a night, she said casually, as if it were nothing. Obviously. We always stay at the best. Quality matters. She talked about the luxury car they had rented. She mentioned shopping on Michigan Avenue. We bought a few things. Nothing major, just a few $1,000s. She spoke while looking at me, expecting a reaction, expecting me to be impressed. I just nodded. "How nice, that's lovely," Patricia continued, her voice dripping with false modesty. "You know, Catherine, we've always been very careful with money. We worked hard. We invested well. Now we have properties in 3 states. Robert has major real estate developments. And I oversee our investments." She smiled, a smile of superiority. "And you? What exactly do you do?" Her tone was sweet but venomous. I could feel the trap closing. "I work in an office," I replied, lowering my gaze. "I do a little bit of everything. Paperwork, filing, simple things." Patricia exchanged a look with Robert, a look loaded with meaning, with silent judgment. "Ah, I see. Administrative work? That's fine. It's honest. All jobs are dignified." "Right. Of course," I replied. The food arrived. Enormous plates with tiny portions, all decorated like art. Patricia cut her steak with precision. "This costs $80, she said. "But it's worth it. Quality is worth paying for. One can't just eat anything, right?" I nodded. "Of course, you're right." And with every word, every comment, every condescending smile, I felt the anger building inside me. But I kept it controlled, cold, like a river under ice. Because I knew my moment was coming. Patricia took a sip of her expensive red wine, swirling it in her glass as if she were an expert sommelier. "This wine is from an exclusive region in France. It costs $200 a bottle. But when you know quality, You don't skimp. Do you drink wine? Catherine, only on special occasions, I replied, and usually the cheapest one. I don't understand much about these things. Patricia smiled condescendingly. Oh, don't worry. Not everyone has a trained palate. That comes with experience, with travel, with education. She paused for effect. Robert and I have visited vineyards in Europe, South America, and California. We are quite knowledgeable. Robert nodded, his chest puffing slightly. It's a hobby, something we enjoy. Bella is learning too. She has good taste. She inherited it from us. He looked at Bella with pride. Then Robert leaned back in his chair, clearly warming to his favorite topic. Catherine. Building wealth isn't just about working hard. It's about working smart. He tapped his temple. Only fools pay full taxes. Smart people know how to work the system, how to optimize. There are legal loopholes, strategies, ways to minimize what you owe. That's how you build real wealth. I felt a flash of anger but kept my voice calm. I pay every cent I owe. That's what builds schools, hospitals, roads. That's what helps communities. Robert chuckled dismissively. How noble. But nobility doesn't make you rich, does it? The tension at the table thickened. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Bella stared at her plate. Patricia turned to me with renewed interest. And you, Catherine, do you have any hobbies? Anything you enjoy doing in your free time? I shrugged. I watch television, cook, walk in the park. Simple things. Patricia and Robert exchanged another look. That look that said everything without words. How lovely, Patricia said. Simple things have their charm too. Although, of course, one always aspires to more, right? To see the world, to experience new things, to grow culturally. But, well, I understand not everyone has those opportunities. I nodded slowly. You're right. Not everyone has those opportunities. The waiter arrived with dessert, tiny portions of something that looked like edible art. Patricia ordered the most expensive one, $30 for a piece of cake the size of a cookie. This is delicious, she said after the first bite. It has edible gold on top. See those little golden flakes? It's a detail only the best restaurants offer. As she spoke, her gaze drifted to a table nearby where a heavier woman sat enjoying her meal. Patricia leaned toward Robert and whispered, but loud enough for me to hear, "Some people have no self-control." She then glanced at an elderly couple across the room. Why do they even bother dressing up? No one wants to see that. I felt my patience wearing thin. Michael, the waiter, stood nearby and I caught his eye. There was sympathy there, understanding. He had heard everything. Patricia straightened in her chair, her expression becoming serious, falsely maternal. Catherine, I think it's important that we talk about something as a family now that we are all here. She paused dramatically. Daniel is our son-in-law and we love him very much. Bella loves him and we respect that decision. But as parents, we always want the best for our daughter. Daniel tensed up. Mom, I don't think this is the time. Patricia raised her hand. Let me finish. Son? This is important. She looked at me. Catherine, I understand you did the best you could with Daniel. I know raising him alone wasn't easy, and I truly respect you for that. But now Daniel is at another stage in his life. He is married. He has responsibilities. And well, Bella and he deserve to have stability. Stability, I asked softly. Yes, Patricia replied. Financial stability, emotional stability. We have helped a lot and we will continue to help. We gave them $40,000 for the house down payment. We paid $15,000 for their 3-week honeymoon through Europe, because that's just who we are. We believe in supporting our children. She looked at me intently. And you. Were you able to help Daniel with anything when they got married? The question floated like a sharp knife. Not much, I replied. I gave them what I could. A small gift, Patricia smiled. How sweet. Every detail counts. Right. The amount doesn't matter. The intention is what's important. And right then, I felt the rage begin to stir within me. The rage wasn't explosive. It was cold, controlled, like a river under ice. I breathed slowly, kept the timid smile, and let Patricia keep talking. Because that's what people like her do. They talk. They inflate themselves. They show off. And the more they talk, the more they reveal themselves. The more they expose the emptiness inside. Bella was looking at her plate as if she wanted to disappear. Daniel had his jaw clenched, and I just sat there, watching, waiting, knowing that very soon everything was about to change. Patricia wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice taking on a tone of false concern. Catherine, at your age, living alone with a limited salary, it's natural for Daniel to worry about you, to feel that he must take care of you, and that's fine. He is a good son. But we don't want that worry to affect his marriage. Do you understand me? Perfectly, I replied. Patricia smiled, pleased. I'm glad you understand. That's why we wanted to talk to you. She glanced at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. Robert and I have thought about something. She paused dramatically, as if she were about to announce a great gift. We could help you financially, give you a small monthly allowance, something that allows you to live more comfortably without Daniel having to worry so much. Obviously, it would be modest. We can't work miracles, but it would be a support. I remained silent, watching her, waiting. She continued, her voice honey-sweet but laced with poison. We were thinking maybe $500 a month, perhaps $700, depending on the circumstances. And in exchange, we would only ask you to respect Daniel and Bella's space, not to seek them out so much, not to pressure them, to give them the freedom to build their life together without interference. How does that sound? There it was, the offer, the bribe disguised as charity. They wanted to buy me off. They wanted to pay me to disappear from my son's life, so I wouldn't be a nuisance, so I wouldn't embarrass their precious daughter with my poverty. Daniel exploded. Mom, that's enough. You don't have to listen to this. Patricia interrupted him smoothly. Daniel, calm down. We're talking like adults. Your mother understands. Right. Catherine. I picked up my napkin, calmly wiped my lips, took a sip of water, and let the silence grow. Everyone was looking at me. Patricia with expectation, Robert with arrogance, Bella with shame, Daniel with desperation. Before I could respond, Patricia kept talking, unable to help herself. You see, Catherine, I understand what it's like to come from nothing. I grew up poor in a small town in Tennessee. No electricity, no running water. We worked in the fields from dawn to dusk. I watched my parents die young because they couldn't afford medicine. Robert and I, we clawed our way out of that life. We promised ourselves we would never be poor again, never be powerless again. She paused, her eyes distant for a moment. And we succeeded. We built an empire. But to do that, we had to make hard choices. 20 years ago, I cut ties with my siblings. They were still struggling, still poor, still stuck in that same small town. I couldn't let them drag me down. I had worked too hard to escape. I stared at her, genuinely shocked. You abandoned your own family because they were poor. Patricia's face hardened. I made a choice, a smart choice. Sentiment doesn't build empires. Catherine, it holds you back. Robert nodded in agreement. Family is important, but so is protecting what you've built. You can't save everyone. That was it. The final straw. the last piece of evidence I needed to confirm what I already knew. These people weren't just wealthy, they were hollow. They had money, but they had lost their humanity somewhere along the way. I sat there letting their words wash over me. The anger inside me wasn't hot anymore. It was ice cold, sharp, controlled. I breathed slowly, kept my timid smile plastered on my face, and let Patricia continue to dig her own grave with every word, because that's what people like her do. They talk. They can't help themselves. They inflate their egos. They show off their wealth. They reveal their true nature piece by piece. And the more they talk, the more they expose the emptiness inside, the more they show you exactly who they are. I thought of Lisa, my sister, who had been broken by people just like this, who had died without ever standing up for herself, without ever fighting back. I looked at the photograph in my mind, her sad eyes staring back at me. This is for you, Lisa. I won't let them break me like they broke you. I took another sip of water. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. The jazz band played softly in the background. The other diners continued their conversations, oblivious to the war being waged at our table. And then, finally, I spoke. My voice came out differently. It was no longer timid. It was no longer small. It was firm, clear, and cold as winter steel. That's an interesting offer. Patricia, truly very generous of you. Patricia smiled victoriously, thinking she had won. I'm glad you see it that way. I nodded slowly, but I have a few questions. Just to understand clearly. Patricia blinked, suddenly uncertain. Of course. Ask whatever you like. The game had changed, and she was just beginning to realize it. I leaned forward slightly, my posture no longer submissive. The diners at nearby tables began to notice the shift in atmosphere. Some glanced our way, sensing the tension. How much exactly would you consider a modest monthly allowance, I asked, my voice steady. Patricia hesitated for just a moment. Well, we were thinking about $500, maybe $700, depending on circumstances. I nodded slowly. I see. $700 a month for me to disappear from my son's life. Patricia frowned. I wouldn't put it like that. But yes, I responded calmly. That is exactly how you put it. She adjusted in her chair, uncomfortable for the first time that evening. Catherine, I don't want you to misunderstand. We just want to help. Of course. I said, help? Let me ask you something else. How did you help with the house down payment? How much was that? Patricia nodded, her pride returning. $40,000. $40,000. How generous. I paused. And the honeymoon, $15,000, Patricia said. It was a 3-week trip through Europe. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, the best restaurants. Incredible, I replied. So you've invested about $55,000 in Daniel and Bella. Patricia smiled, pleased with herself. Well, when you love your children, you don't hold back. I nodded slowly, as if considering her words carefully. You're right. When you love your children, you don't hold back. I let the silence stretch for a moment. But tell me something. Patricia, all that investment, all that money, did it buy you anything? Patricia blinked, confused. Like what? Like respect. I continued, my voice growing stronger. Did it buy you real love, or did it just buy obedience? The atmosphere changed instantly. Patricia stopped smiling. Excuse me. My tone became sharper, more direct. You've spent the entire night talking about money, about how much things cost, how much you spent, how much you have, but you haven't asked even once how I am, if I'm happy, if something hurts me, if I need company. You have only calculated my worth, and apparently, I'm worth $700 a month. Patricia paled. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, I interrupted her firmly. Yes, you did. Since I arrived, you've been measuring my value with your wallet. And do you know what I discovered? Patricia. I discovered that the people who only talk about money are the ones who least understand their true value, Robert intervened, his voice tight with anger. I think you are misinterpreting my wife's intentions. I looked at him directly, unflinching. And what are her intentions to treat me with pity, to humiliate me throughout dinner, to offer me charities so I'd vanish from my son's life? Robert opened his mouth, but no words came out. He wasn't used to being challenged. Marcus was pale, gripping the edge of the table. Mom, please. I looked at him gently. No. Daniel, please don't. I'm done being quiet. I turned back to Patricia, who was now visibly shaken. You said something very interesting a moment ago. You said you admire women who struggle alone, who are brave. So let me ask you something. Have you ever struggled alone? Have you ever worked without your husband backing you? Have you ever built something with your own 2 hands, without your family's money? Patricia stammered. I have my own achievements. I manage our investments. I oversee properties. I make important decisions in our businesses. I nodded thoughtfully. Businesses your husband built, properties you bought together, investments made with the money he generated. Or am I wrong? Robert's face flushed red. That's not fair. My wife works just as hard as I do. Of course, I replied calmly. I don't doubt she works. But there is a difference between managing money that already exists and creating it from scratch. Between overseeing an empire you inherited and building it brick by brick. Don't you think? Patricia pressed her lips together, her carefully constructed superiority crumbling. I don't know where you are going with this. Catherine, let me explain, I said. And then I began to tell them my story. The real story. The one Daniel had never heard in full detail. The one that would change everything. The waiter, Michael, stood at a respectful distance, but I could see him listening, his expression one of quiet respect. Other diners had stopped their conversations. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath, and I was ready to reveal the truth, ready to shatter their world. Daniel stared at me. He had never heard this story in such detail. His eyes were wide, listening. I continued, my voice steady but filled with emotion. One day, I got pregnant. The father disappeared the moment I told him. My family turned their backs on me. They said I had brought shame on them, that I had made my bed and now I had to lie in it. I had to decide whether to keep going or give up. I chose to keep going. I paused, taking a sip of water. No one at the table spoke. Even Patricia had gone silent. I worked until the last day of my pregnancy. I went back to work 2 weeks after Daniel was born. A neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, took care of him during the day. I worked 12 hours a day, sometimes more. I didn't stay a secretary. I couldn't afford to. I studied at night, taking courses at the community college. I learned English at the public library, sitting at those old wooden tables with worn-out books. I learned accounting, finance, administration. I became an expert in things no one taught me, all on my own, all while raising a child alone, all while paying rent, buying food, medicine, clothes. There was a woman, I continued, my voice softer now. Her name was Margaret. She was my first supervisor at the company. She had also been poor once, had also struggled. She saw something in me. She believed in me when no one else did. She taught me everything. How to negotiate, how to lead, how to stand tall in rooms full of men who didn't think I belonged. She told me something I never forgot. She said, never let anyone make you feel small. Your worth is not in your bank account. It's in your character, your integrity, your resilience. I looked at Patricia. Margaret died 5 years ago. I'm doing this tonight to honor her memory. Patricia was staring at her plate now. Her arrogance was crumbling, piece by piece. And you know what happened? I climbed up, little by little, from secretary to assistant, from assistant to coordinator, from coordinator to manager, from manager to director, and finally, to chief financial officer. It took me 20 years. 20 years of nonstop work, of sacrifices you can't even imagine, of nights when I cried myself to sleep wondering if I could keep going, of mornings when I got up anyway because I had a son who depended on me. But I did it. Daniel had tears streaming down his face. "Mom," he whispered. I looked at him with all the love in my heart. "And do you know how much I earn now?" Patricia shook her head slowly, afraid to hear the answer. $45,000 a month. The silence was absolute. It was as if someone had hit a pause button on the entire universe. The jazz band stopped playing. The conversations at other tables ceased. Even the clinking of silverware went quiet. Daniel dropped his fork. It clattered against his plate, the sound echoing in the stillness. Bella's eyes went wide, her mouth falling open. Robert frowned in disbelief, leaning forward as if he hadn't heard correctly, and Patricia froze completely, her face pale, her mouth slightly open. $45,000, I repeated slowly, letting each word sink in. Every month. For almost 20 years. That's over $10 million in gross income over my career. Not counting investments, not counting bonuses, not counting company stock options. Patricia blinked several times, as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. No, I don't understand. You earn $45,000 a month. That's right, I replied calmly. I am the chief financial officer for a major tech corporation. I oversee budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars. I manage financial operations across multiple divisions. I make decisions that affect thousands of employees. I sign contracts that you couldn't read without a team of lawyers, and I do it every day. The manager of the restaurant, Thomas, stood at a distance, watching with professional interest. Other diners had turned in their seats, unabashedly staring now. Michael, the waiter, stood with his hands clasped, a small smile of satisfaction on his face. Daniel was pale, his hands shaking. "Mom, why did you never tell me?" I looked at him tenderly. "Because you didn't need to know, son. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. Because I wanted you to become a person, not an heir. Because money corrupts, and I wasn't going to let it corrupt you." The truth hung in the air like a thunderclap, and nothing would ever be the same again. Bella whispered, her voice barely audible. "But then, why do you live in that small apartment? Why do you wear simple clothes? Why don't you drive a luxury car?" I smiled gently. "Because I don't need to impress anyone. Because true wealth isn't shown off. Because I learned that the more you have, the less you need to prove it." I looked directly at Patricia. "That's why I came dressed like this tonight. That's why I pretended to be poor. That's why I acted like a broke and naive woman. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing. I wanted to see your true colors. And boy, did I see them. Patricia, I saw them perfectly." Patricia was red with shame, rage, and humiliation all mixed together. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "If you earned so much money, we would know. Daniel would know. Why would he believe you are poor? Because I let him." I replied simply, "Because I never talked about my job. Because I live modestly. Because the money I earn, I invest, I save, I multiply. I don't spend it on flashy jewelry or showing off in expensive restaurants." Robert cleared his throat, trying to regain some control. "Even so, this doesn't change the fact that you were rude, that you misinterpreted our intentions. Really? I looked at him steadily. I misinterpreted when you said I was a burden to Daniel. I misinterpreted when you offered to pay me $700 to disappear from his life. I misinterpreted every condescending comment about my clothes, my job, my life. Robert didn't answer. Neither did Veronica. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I stood up slowly. Everyone looked at me. Let me tell you something that clearly no one has ever told you. Money does not buy class. It does not buy real education. It does not buy empathy. You have money, perhaps a lot of it, but you don't have an ounce of what truly matters. I looked at Patricia one more time. I pity you, Patricia, because you're still that scared little girl who went hungry. You're still running from poverty, even though you have millions. You abandoned your own family because they reminded you of where you came from. And now you measure everyone by their bank account because that's the only value you understand. Patricia stood up, furious. And you do. You who lied, who deceived us, who made us look like fools. I didn't make you look like fools, I replied coldly. You took care of that all on your own. I just gave you the opportunity to show who you are. And you did it magnificently. The waiter approached timidly. Excuse me. Would you like anything else? Robert shook his head abruptly. Just the check. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Patricia sat back down, defeated. Her posture was no longer elegant. It was the posture of someone who had just lost something important. And it wasn't money. It was power. The waiter returned with the check in a leather folder and placed it discreetly in the center of the table. No one touched it. The tension was suffocating. Robert finally reached for it, opened the folder, and pulled out his wallet. He extracted several credit cards, all golden, all shiny, symbols of his wealth and status. He selected one carefully and placed it on top of the bill. The waiter took it and left. No one spoke during those waiting minutes. The silence was thick, uncomfortable, heavy. Bella cried quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Daniel held my hand tightly. Patricia stared at the wall, her face a mask of contained fury. Robert checked his phone repeatedly to avoid eye contact. The waiter returned, his expression apologetic. Sir, your card was declined. Robert looked up abruptly, his face flushing. How was it declined? The waiter repeated gently. Declined. Do you have another form of payment? Robert turned red, his voice rising. That's impossible. That card has an extremely high limit. It must be a system error. The waiter shrugged politely. I can try again if you like. Robert handed him another card, his hands shaking slightly with anger and embarrassment. The waiter left again. Patricia looked at her husband nervously. What happened? I don't know, Robert replied, irritated. It must be a bank error. Maybe they froze the account for security reasons. It happens sometimes when you travel internationally. I nodded with feigned understanding. Of course. Those things happen. How inconvenient. The waiter returned again, his expression even more apologetic. I'm sorry, sir. This one was also declined. Robert stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. I'm calling the bank right now. He stormed out of the restaurant, his phone already at his ear. Patricia remained seated, her face pale, her hands trembling. This has never happened to us, she murmured. Never. I said nothing, just watched, just waited. The universe, it seemed, had its own sense of justice. What terrible timing, I commented without emotion. Daniel looked at the check, then at me. Mom, I can pay for this. No, I interrupted him firmly. You are not paying for anything. I took out my wallet, a simple old leather wallet worn at the edges, the kind you might find at any department store. I opened it slowly, deliberately, and then I pulled out another card. This one was not black. It was transparent, made of heavy metal, catching the light from the chandeliers above. a card that less than 1% of people in the world possess. I placed it on the table in front of Patricia. She looked at it. Her eyes widened. She recognized what it was immediately. "That's a Centurion card," she whispered. "That's right," I replied calmly. "American Express invitation only. You can apply for it. They invite you. Minimum annual spending requirement of $250,000, $5,000 annual fee just for having it, and benefits you can never imagine." The light reflected off the metallic surface. Thomas, the restaurant manager, noticed from across the room. His eyes widened and he immediately approached our table, bowing his head slightly in respect. Diners at nearby tables saw it too. I heard whispers. "That's a Centurion card. How does she have that?" Patricia said nothing. Her face had gone from red to pale in seconds. Her hands trembled as she stared at the card. Michael, the waiter, took the card carefully, as if it were something sacred. He handled it with both hands, his professional demeanor never wavering, but I could see the respect in his eyes. He returned in less than 2 minutes. "Thank you, Miss Hayes. Everything is settled. Would you like the receipt?" "It's not necessary," I replied. Michael nodded and stepped back, but before he left, I stopped him. "Michael, wait." I reached into my wallet again and pulled out $200 in cash. I placed it in his hand. "This is for you. Not just for the excellent service tonight, but for maintaining your dignity and professionalism even when you were treated poorly." Michael looked at the money, then at me. His eyes glistened slightly. "Ma'am, this is too much." "No, it's not," I said firmly. "Thank you, Michael, not just for the service, but for showing what real class looks like, for treating everyone with respect, regardless of how they're dressed or how much money you think they have." Michael's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, ma'am, not just for the tip, but for showing dignity, for proving that wealth and class are not the same thing." The contrast was stark and intentional. Patricia had treated Michael like a servant, snapping her fingers, complaining, looking down on him. And now she watched as I treated him with the respect he deserved. The lesson was clear, and it cut deeper than any words could. I stood up, took my old wallet, my faded canvas tote bag, and looked at Patricia one last time. The dinner was delicious. Thank you for the recommendation of the place, and thank you for showing me exactly who you are. You saved me a lot of time, a lot of energy, and many future disappointments. Patricia finally looked up. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from contained rage. "This doesn't end here," she said, her voice trembling. "You can't just humiliate us and walk out as if nothing happened. Bella is our daughter. Daniel is our son-in-law. We will still be family. You will have to see us. You are right." I smiled calmly. "I will have to see you at birthdays, Christmases, family gatherings. But now I will see you differently. I will no longer wonder what you think of me. I already know, and you will know that I know, and you will live with that. Every time you see me, every time you pretend to be kind, you will remember this night. You will remember how you treated someone you thought was beneath you, and you will remember how wrong you were." Robert returned to the table, his phone in his hand, his face pale. "There's a problem with the accounts," he said quietly, "a temporary security block. It will be resolved tomorrow." He looked at the table. "Did someone already pay?" "Yes," Patricia replied without looking at him. "She paid." Robert looked at me. His pride was shattered. "Thank you," he murmured. It was barely audible. "You're welcome," I replied. "That's what family is for, isn't it? To help each other, especially when someone needs a small allowance. Say, $700, or in this case, $850, which is what this dinner cost." Robert closed his eyes. Patricia clenched her fists in her lap, and I walked toward the exit, my head held high, knowing that I had won not with cruelty, but with truth. I walked out of the restaurant. Daniel walked beside me. The fresh night air of Chicago hit my face. It was cold, crisp, carrying the scent of autumn. Yellow leaves scattered across the sidewalk, crunching under our feet. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with the cool evening air. I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off me. Not a physical weight, but an emotional one. The weight of pretending, of tolerating, of keeping silent. The weight of watching my son be ashamed of me. The weight of letting people measure my worth by their standards. Daniel took my arm gently. "Mom, are you okay?" "Perfectly fine," I replied. "Better than ever. And you, Daniel?" Daniel sighed deeply. "I don't know. I'm processing everything. I can't believe you never told me about your job, about your money, about everything you accomplished." I stopped and looked him in the eyes. "Does it bother you?" He quickly shook his head. "No, of course not. I'm proud. Incredibly proud. But I also feel foolish. Blind. How did I not see it?" "You are not foolish," I told him. "You simply saw what I wanted you to see, and I did it on purpose because I needed you to grow up without depending on me, without feeling you had an economic safety net waiting for you. I needed you to fight, to work, to value everything you achieved on your own." Bella stepped forward, her mascara smeared from crying. "Mother-in-law, I'm so sorry. I didn't know my parents would be like that. I'm ashamed." I looked at her gently. "You didn't know about my money, but you knew how your parents are. You know how they treat people they consider inferior, and you did nothing to stop them." Bella sobbed. "I wanted to say something, but they are my parents. I've been taught my whole life not to contradict them." "I know," I replied, "and Daniel is my son. And yet I let him make his own decisions. I let him choose his life, his wife, his path, because that is how you love, with freedom, not with control, not with money, not with manipulation." A taxi pulled up. I had called for one as we left the restaurant. The driver was Wojciech, the same Polish man who had driven me here. He smiled when he saw me. "Going home, ma'am." "Yes, please." Daniel stopped me before I got in. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you do it? Why did you come pretending to be poor? Why didn't you just tell them the truth from the beginning?" I turned to face him fully, because I needed to know son. I needed to confirm if my suspicions were correct, if Bella's family was really as I imagined. And unfortunately, I was right. I paused. You don't have to apologize for them, but you do have to decide what kind of husband you want to be, what kind of father you want to be someday. You have just seen two very different ways of handling money and power. Your in-laws' way and mine. They use it to control, to humiliate, to feel superior. I use it to have freedom, to help without showing off, to live peacefully. You decide which path to follow. Daniel nodded slowly, taking in my words. "I understand, Mom. I really do." I opened the taxi door and got in. I rolled down the window. Daniel came closer. "Mom, one last question. Are you ever going to forgive Patricia and Robert?" I thought about it for a moment. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it mean allowing it to happen again. I might forgive them someday when I see a real change, when they start seeing people as people, not as numbers. But until then, I will simply be polite, distant, and extremely cautious. As the taxi pulled away, Wojciech looked at me through the rear-view mirror. "That was quite an evening. Ma'am, I saw you give money to the homeless man earlier. You are a good person." "Thank you, Wojciech." I smiled. "Can I ask where you're from originally?" "Poland," he said. "I came here 25 years ago. My grandmother used to say, you can tell the measure of a person not by how they treat their equals, but by how they treat those who can do nothing for them." "Your grandmother was very wise," I said. We drove through the quiet streets of Chicago. The city lights twinkled like stars. We passed Lincoln Park and finally arrived at my building, the same modest building I had lived in for 15 years. Wojciech looked at the building, then at me. "You live here." "I live here," I confirmed. He shook his head in wonder. "Most people with money move to expensive neighborhoods. You truly are different." "I'm just myself," I replied. "Money is just a tool, not an identity." I paid him generously and stepped out. As I walked toward my building, I looked up at my 6th-floor window. The light was off, dark, silent, waiting for me. I climbed the stairs, unlocked my door, and stepped inside. Everything was in its place. The simple living room, the small kitchen, the bookshelf full of books, the photographs of Daniel growing up. And I felt at peace, because this place was mine, truly mine. Not bought to impress, not decorated to show off. Simply a space where I could be myself without masks, without pretensions. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window and looked out at the Chicago night. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. Real wealth is not about how much you have. It's about how much peace you feel, how many genuine people surround you, how many times you can look in the mirror and be proud of who you are. Patricia and Robert had millions. But I had this tranquility, this authenticity, this pure love for my son, and that made me infinitely richer than them. I never pretended to be poor again. I didn't need to. I had learned what I needed to learn. I had seen what I needed to see. And I had protected what mattered most: my dignity, my truth, and my relationship with my son. Patricia and Robert continued to be who they were, rich in money, poor in spirit. But that was no longer my problem. I had spoken my truth. I had set my boundaries. I had protected my peace. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to pretend who I was. I was simply Catherine, mother, CFO, woman, survivor, fighter, rich in every sense that truly mattered, and that was more than enough. It was everything. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story.